Hi everyone, it's Alyssa and this is Always Cinema Chic, and today I am going to review Tenet, which is the movie that I have been waiting for this entire year. So Tenet is directed, of course, by Chris Nolan and stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, and Kenneth Branagh. And like I said, this was the movie that I was waiting for in 2020. And while it does kill me that I wasn't able to see it in the movie theater, which is the number one movie that I did want to see in the theater, it it actually didn't bother me once I saw it at home. I have a larger screen and I have the sound system, which we will get to the sound in a little bit. But it was such a great experience. And the one nice part about it is that 2 days later, because I bought it, I just watched it again a second time, and then literally everything made perfect sense. So I'm not going to lie, the first time that you go into the film, your brain does hurt a little bit because you have to focus on every line, on every scene, on every action to make sure you understand what's going on. But when you see it the second time, you really do understand what's going on in the film. And that is mainly because Chris Nolan has it laid out so well that the movie was really just that clear and kind of easy to watch. So I'll read the IMDb summary first, and then I'll explain how I'm going to do this review because this one is a little bit different, I feel like, to talk about than some movies. So it says, armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. So this is the kind of movie where it is actually impossible to not discuss spoilers. So this will be a completely spoiler-filled movie review. I'm not going to go over every single beat of the film because that kind of analysis and plot summary that is online. There are a ton of charts that I saw that help you to figure out how the way time works in the movie. I really don't think you need it if you watch it a second time, because I do think that the film is very well explained. And so while I do feel that this is a movie that you really should see in a theater, and I hope that they bring this back next summer and they put this in the movie theaters so that people who wanted to see it in the theater can actually see it. It was playing in a movie theater near my house for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, but still they had just opened up movie theaters and the numbers are so high where I live that it just doesn't make sense for me to go in and actually risk something for watching this movie, especially when it's available right now to watch. Although I will definitely watch it if they re-release it in the movie theater because it is such a spectacle. And the one thing I would say about the movie is this isn't some huge, insightful, deeper meaning type of a story. It's a really fun spy movie that is exceptionally intelligent feeling for a spy movie, because what I love about Chris Nolan films is that his movies are always about perception and how we are blinded by some part of our perception, and he wants to open that up, right? And so I love that that is sort of that theme that runs through all of his films, and this one is definitely no different at all. I'll start with actually what didn't work as well, so I can go into what did work, because I feel like there are so many more things that worked in this movie than didn't work. But that is one of the things I would say. The film doesn't. It has a heart, and when you get to the end of the film, that was my favorite part of the film, and I'll get to why in a little bit. But at the same time, it didn't have that strong emotional core that, say, what you would feel watching Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio, where it was almost like the heist of that film was a side plot because you really just focused so much on Leonardo DiCaprio and the relationship with his wife, Marion Cotillard, in the movie. And that heart just kept you going through the whole film. And there are definitely comparisons that can be made between the two movies. The way both films use exposition is very similar. And that's because both films are dealing with such a complex idea that Nolan literally has to tell the audience exactly what's going on. So you do get a lot of scenes of exposition. But if you didn't have that exposition, you would be clueless as to what was going on in this movie. So it really was actually necessary. But the main character called the protagonist, who's played by John David Washington, and John David Washington is awesome in this movie. He's so tough. He's so cool. He's everything that you would want a lead to be. I would just say within the writing, you don't get as much about his character and his background, which is fine. And I understand that's kind of the point of a spy movie is it doesn't matter what his background is. But maybe that tiny bit more heart could have been infused in the character, in the writing, just so that it really did like move the audience along. And the second thing that I thought was a little bit of a problem was the sound. And I had heard that previously. But the movie is very loud. And I will say certain people, their accents make it difficult. And the number one person that I couldn't understand was Ives, who's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. And I kind of do not like this actor at all, ever. He ruined Anna Karenina for me. And I love that book. And he completely ruined the movie. I don't know what accent he was doing, but there were definitely moments where the words were all stringing together. Sometimes it sounded Scottish, sometimes it sounded almost like a Geordie accent. I don't know what he was going for, but he made it really difficult to understand what he was saying. And especially at the end when they're going through all of the military tactics, I was like, okay, what words? What is he actually saying? So I did find that when I put the subtitles on, I understood everything and I understood everything that he was saying. I did have to look up, what's a pincer movement? Right? I don't know those kind of military tactic terms. So I did have to look some things up after I saw the movie the first time. But once you see it and you understand kind of what this temporal pincer movement of having people who are going forward, who can kind of give information to the characters who are inverted so that they can be successful in this attack and whatever it is that they're trying to do. So we see the bad guy do it, Sator, who's played by Kenneth Branagh, and then we see the good guys do it as well. So you do have to kind of understand a little bit about some of the military tactics to understand, but that's besides the point. The sound was mainly good. I understood most things, but like I said, there were a few key moments where the score or just the sound mixing was so loud that it was difficult for me to hear the actual dialogue of what the characters were saying. But like I said, once I watched it again with the subtitles, and that's why I'm so glad I got to see it on Blu-ray, because I could watch it just straight through once and then watch it again with the subtitles, and then there were really no questions. But in terms of the movie, that's kind of everything that I had a small problem with. And like I say, it was very, very small. This is, for me, one of my favorite movies that I have seen all year, just because it was so fun and there is such incredible action and special effects, but done in this old school way with very little CGI. So everything that you think of for Chris Nolan, you're getting in this movie. And it's just kind of like bigger than anything that he's ever done. It even feels bigger than Inception, but I would say Inception is a close second. But my number one favorite thing about this film, well, the main plot was very interesting about the inverted entropy and how objects are moving backwards and how you can then have people be inverted, and now they look to us like they're moving backwards, but from their perception of reality, they're actually moving forwards, and how you can have people go into whatever that kind of like circular turnstile thing was, and then have people inverted and kind of revert. It was very interesting because it wasn't necessarily time travel. And, I'm not sure of the physics of this movie at all. I did read one article that said there is some science behind this film, but it's not necessarily realistic. But the idea of like an inverted entropy and also visualizing something that is going to happen for you but hasn't happened yet, but then that affecting what's going on. I thought all of that was really interesting, and it fills right in with the kind of person that Chris Nolan is, what he writes about, what he is interested in. But for me, and this is going to be weird, the best part of the film was the relationship between Neil, played by Robert Pattinson, and the protagonist, John David Washington. Their friendship was so interesting because when you watch it the first time, I was kind of like, who is Neil? He just kind of showed up out of nowhere. He knows a lot about the character, and you can explain a lot of that away by saying, oh, well, if he's part of some kind of organization that has all of this intel, well, then maybe he would know all of this stuff about him. But when you watch the film a second time, you can see in Neil's eyes that this is his best friend, and this has been his best friend for years, and that they have such a relationship with each other, but it's just that the protagonist doesn't know it at this point. And by the end of the movie, where you realize that Neil has to go back in to kind of close the loop, and he knows he's going to die, and he knows this is the last moment that he's seeing his friend. I love that whole line of, this is the beginning of our friendship for you, but it's the end of the friendship for him. And he knows all of this stuff about his friend. And so my mind actually went to a bunch of scenes that weren't in the film. And I started thinking about what it was like when the protagonist actually creates the Tenet organization, how they met each other, how long they've known each other, missions that they've gone on together. And all of these stories just kind of started just popping into my head. And the fact that I could create a whole other movie in addition to the movie that I just saw made me like it even more, because it showed me how much I cared about these characters and how much there is a side story with Elizabeth Debicki, and it does look like the protagonist romantically likes her. But to me, that was just a side story to get the plot moving. And what it was really about was their friendship. And that was my favorite part of the movie, which is very, very odd. But there are so many other things to like. I loved, once again, the storyline is very interesting. I like the idea of just kind of going to these big locations. You're going from Mumbai to Oslo, you're going back to Mumbai, and all of these different cities. You're in the Soviet Union. Like, there were just there's so much movement. So it's such a traditional spy movie in that sense. And the set pieces are larger than life. And all of that is exactly what you would expect. The special effects are incredible. My favorite scene with the special effects was with the plane that was getting crashed to create the diversion. And when you see the whole sequence with what you find out later is actually John David Washington inverted, who's fighting himself and then also running past Neil, that when you see the scene and you see that action sequence from that second perspective, I just thought that was incredible. I loved it. I loved it so much to get those different perceptions of what was going on within those sequences and to have that full kind of insight. And that sequence, to me, helped to explain the whole process of inversion better than any other sequence in the film, because you're clearly going through it in real time with the character. So any confusion that you had earlier on in terms of like, how does this inversion work, he completely clarifies in that action sequence because you're going through everything with him. So the real special effects, the lack of CGI, it's everything you want to see. The score in this movie was actual perfection. I feel like if this doesn't get nominated for best score, I don't know what should get nominated. It fit every beat and every second of the movie. And every kind of movement of the character fit what was going on in the score. My favorite part of the score is the highway chase sequence, and it's when the protagonist gets on the fire truck and you see the fire truck kind of like moving into the main highway, that lane. The music, the score, I almost couldn't pay attention to what was going on in the scene because the score was so gorgeous. And so I want to make sure that I get this person's name right who did the score. So it's Ludwig Göransson, and he is not the traditional person that Chris Nolan usually uses. He usually has Hans Zimmer do the score, and I love the way Hans Zimmer does the score, especially Dunkirk. I thought was great, but to have someone different in. Also, the end credits, they use music from Travis Scott, and that just fit into the film so well. It fit into the score. I had seen a thing about the score after, and everyone worked together to really create something that was special for this movie, and it shows. The other thing, oh my God, the costumes, the men's suit in this movie, they are just the greatest suits I feel like I have ever seen in a film, ever. Like the fabrics, I know once again, these aren't things you would think of when you were watching Tenet, but I could not help it. The outfits that they put John David Washington and Robert Pattinson in are just actual perfection. They look so luxurious, which you need with the world that they're trying to enter into. So everything made sense why they were dressed a certain way, but it really elevated the film as well to me. And then getting to the villain, because the villain of the movie is pretty important because this is a spy movie, and so Kenneth Branagh plays Sator, which is very similar to Sato from Inception. I couldn't stop thinking of that, so that was kind of like another connection I kept thinking of during the movie. I mean, we all know that Kenneth Branagh can go completely over the top, and he does. He totally does in this, but I feel like it works because it is a spy movie, and the villain in a spy movie is supposed to be super over the top, and I loved the storyline that it was almost dumb luck how he was able to start communicating with the future. And because he was out there and he was looking, I think, for the plutonium after there was an explosion in his village, that basically the future contacted him and gave him all these gold bars. I thought that was really interesting because he never would have fallen into this role if not for just blind luck, but he is difficult to watch at points because he's so abusive. I mean, he is very abusive to his wife. And I had heard that the scene where he kicks her, they actually edited it so that it wouldn't be quite as intense. So I wonder what it actually looked like before they edited that part of the film. But he is your quintessential villain who just wants to destroy the world because he's going to die. And if he's going to die, then everyone else needs to die. And, if they just left it like that, that would have been a really kind of stupid, villain. But what I loved the most is that the villain wasn't actually a villain. It was the people in the future who are trying to kill us because of climate change and because their world is completely destroyed and we're the cause of it. So they think by killing all of us, which would happen with some kind of inverted nuclear weapon, that they would still, because of the grandfather paradox, potentially be able to be alive. They describe it as like a switch going on and off, and that they would turn us off, but they would still be on. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but they do kind of explain it with that whole grandfather paradox theory that's in the film. So, he is super over the top. I enjoyed watching him. I thought he was good. I thought Elizabeth Debicki, she goes through by far the greatest character arc within the entire film because she is so weak, and it's crazy to see her not fighting back because she's such a tall woman. I mean, she looks almost twice the size of Kenneth Branagh, but it just shows that the fear that she had from him was so great. And I do like the whole ending of how she becomes the free woman who jumps off the boat, who she saw in the beginning, who, and she didn't realize it was herself, and that she always had that strength within her. All of those things, helped to give a little bit more emotion to the film and what was going on. And it was sort of the driving point, but it was also a little bit of a plot device because she was the reason that John David Washington kept moving forward, and he kept kind of digging deeper. And when she gets shot, and now they have to go back and go in and invert her so that it's not an inverted bullet anymore, so she doesn't die. Every move he made was really for her. And obviously that can't pay off in any kind of relationship because of the way the story is structured and the way the future is structured. They can't be together. Like I said, I liked the relationship between the two guys way, way more. And so the last thing I'll talk about really is the direction of the movie. And Chris Nolan has been, always will be, one of my favorite directors. Is this my favorite movie he's ever done? No, this isn't my favorite. I think Inception is my favorite. Dunkirk, I love those films. I love the way they're edited, but this is right up there. In fact, there is no movie that he's made that I didn't like. For me, his weakest film would be Insomnia, which also makes sense because that's his first film with the studio, and he's doing more of what Warner Brothers actually wants him to do. So all that makes sense. But this is 100% a Chris Nolan movie. There is no one else who would have written this, come up with the story, thought about the editing in this way. Oh, and that's another thing, that the editing. So the editor on this is Jennifer Lame, and she is someone who's totally different, that Chris Nolan never worked with. He is one of those guys that tends to work with the same people over and over again. You see that with his casting and everything. But I think this did him good to work with different people for the score. I think even different people with the acting, having John David Washington, having Robert Pattinson. I know that Kenneth Branagh was in Dunkirk, but I don't think Elizabeth Debicki has been in one of his films before. And it brought something a little bit more fresh to the storyline. I thought the editing was very sharp, and it was very clear to be given a task like that. You need to make this film make sense through the editing. That is quite a feat that she is able to do. There was only one part with the editing that confused me a little bit. And I understand why they did it, but it's the scene where we go through the car chase the second time, and the protagonist is now inverted, and he's in that sort of like mint green car that we see. And when the car flips and we see that I don't want to say past or future, that the forward version of John David Washington actually threw the algorithm piece into the car so that the inverted protagonist could get that piece. I was confused because the car flips and then you see Kenneth Branagh, but you never see him take the algorithm, but then suddenly he has it. So I know we're supposed to get everything from the protagonist's perspective, and he must have not seen that he got it. But even a line just like right after, like, where is it, would have helped to clarify what was going on there. So that was one piece of the editing where I did get a little confused. But when I saw it the second time, I thought, well, maybe he just picked it up, I don't know, like before he gave his little evil villain speech. I don't know. But that was the only part. I thought otherwise this was edited really, really well. I almost said John Nolan, who is his brother. Chris Nolan definitely takes things from himself. He steals from himself, definitely, in this movie. But also I saw little pieces of Arrival in terms of the perception of time that you can have. That one is mainly through, that is through language, but this is through objects and people. But I also saw some connections to Minority Report and seeing something before it happened. But those are all incredible sci-fi things to pull from. Also, I don't watch Doctor Who, but my husband loves Doctor Who. And he said that whole storyline with Neil and the protagonist and, catching each other at different points in time and them being at different points in the friendship, that is directly from one of his favorite seasons of Doctor Who. So I don't know anything about it, but he definitely said that that was probably some inspiration as well. But you see a ton of inspiration from other films, even the ending where he's like, this is going to be the start of a beautiful friendship. Like, that's all Casablanca. And that's the thing I love about Chris Nolan, because this is a guy who loves movies. He loves movies more than anything. And do I think sometimes he goes too far? Yes, because I think he's in his head too much and he's not seeing the full picture. I understand why he was pushing for his movie in movie theaters, but I felt like he wasn't quite understanding the severity of how dangerous that was for people to go into that situation and be in a room for 2.5 hours. This is not a short movie by any means, but to be in that room for 2.5 hours, I don't know why he was so stuck on that particular release date. I do almost wish that they held it for, this upcoming summer. And I know you can't hold everything, and it's better they did, because then with the whole thing with Warner Brothers, it would have gone to HBO Max anyway. So who cares? But I think that put off some people, like him thinking the film was so important. And I love the pretentiousness of him. He is kind of pretentious, but he has a lot of knowledge to back it up, and he loves film, and he gets so excited, and I love listening to him speak. But maybe that was a little bit off-putting with him. But anyway, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I would give it an A. It was one of my favorites of the year. I feel like I actually understand everything that was going on with the plot. So if anyone has any questions, you could always ask me questions, because I feel like after that second viewing, I definitely have a better awareness of it. Oh, and that was the other thing is, I had read an article where Chris Nolan had said he wanted to do this movie because this is the kind of story that could only be told as a film. And I completely agree with that. Visually, you needed to see it, you needed to experience it, to know what was going on with the time and where you were, and if you were with an inverted character or a character who's going forward, and at what point, in time from this character's perspective, where are they? That would have been nearly impossible to do all of that in a novel, because here you could just quickly see the character going through the turnstiles, and now he's inverted, now he's actually gone and he's going forward in time. So you could see it visually. And that's the thing that is so magic about movies. And I know that's why Chris Nolan wanted this released in the theater so badly, because movies and movie theaters give us something that no other art form can give us. And this film is the perfect example of that. And that's why I love it. And that's why I'm always going to love it. Maybe, it does have some themes that are completely worthwhile, and this idea of perception and how we view the world, that's always an interesting theme to sort of look at the relationships, the good and evil. And the other theme I really loved in the movie was the title itself. So when you think of the word Tenet, the first thing I noticed was that it's a palindrome. So it's the same backwards and forwards, which is also reminiscent of Arrival, because Hannah, who is Amy Adams' daughter in the movie, is also a palindrome. So I like that little detail. And then the meaning of the word Tenet really ties into the major theme of the film, which is sort of faith, and just the faith that Neil has in what is going to happen. He never tries to stop the future or change something. Like, the protagonist is always asking, well, if we do something different, can we alter what the future is going to be or the past is going to be? Can you alter those things? And he's like, no, it already happened. That's the faith that he has, in what he's doing. There's no way to get around it, but it's still your choice, right? So it still is that idea of this is your choice. And he has this kind of faith and belief in time because he's seen it and he experiences it, and it's so very real to him. And that's something else that Seder brings up, is the whole idea of like what is good and evil, and how you kind of perceive things, and how does the protagonist know that he's on the side that's good? Because in a way, is he on the side that's the good guy's side? Because the people in the future are going to die as a result of what we have done and where we have put them. So are we the villains in the film? But because we side with the protagonist and we follow him the whole time, how does that sort of play in once again to our perception of what is good and evil? So the title of the film really brings everything together, and goes into all of those themes about how we perceive humanity, what reality actually looks like, and then also how we can gain strength in ourselves as a human being. But maybe this didn't have, the deepest themes running through it, but I really didn't care because it didn't need to be that movie. It just is so visually stunning. It's so well written. It's so well crafted. It's so much fun. You really love the actors in it. I just thought everyone was so good in this movie. And even so, I had just seen Devil All the Time, and Robert Pattinson is super over the top in that movie, and I like it, and I think it really works for that character. But I almost liked him better in this because the subtlety in the acting, when you realize that he is actually from the future and he has been a part of Tenet for many years, the subtlety in the acting was so incredible. And I know that thing came out where he said he didn't understand any, half of the scenes that he was in. He didn't understand what was going on. But I don't buy that for a second, because the acting and the awareness of like where the character arc is for that character was so good, that there's no way he didn't understand what's going in the movie. I mean, there's no way. But anyway, I would love to hear what you guys thought about the movie. Did you like it? Did you see it in the theater? Should they have waited to release it? What kind of questions do you have? All that good stuff. You can write in the comments below. And if you like what you see, then please take the time to subscribe to the channel, and give a thumbs up. And that's about all. I hope that everyone is having a great new year, everyone as well. And I will talk to y'all soon. Bye.